Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
The walls were seemingly endless, and only somewhere high above my head did they extend into a vaulted dome. The endless shelves of books on the sides of the room were awe-inspiring to some, but frightening to others, and lamps were already lit on tables here and there. It was gray and rainy outside, so the extra lighting had been on since morning. God, I hope I won't dream about her now. The tall, blonde guy whispered in horror, "Maybe you'll come to your senses now." Someone to his left answered quietly. An elderly man with large, thick glasses looked at them. Not that one could not talk in the library, but one had to be very quiet so as not to disturb anyone. The library did not like noisy guests. It had always been considered an exemplary library and the face not only of the capital, but of the whole country. Finally, another guy came over to the company and they started looking at some books he had brought. "Did you bring books on aviation?" The blonde guy hissed angrily. "You couldn't think of anything else?" "What did you want?" He replied, "Did you want me to bring you the myths of ancient Greece? And anyway, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here." "What's that got to do with me?" Objected the first. "By the way, I'm a loser. I should be pitied, and you're still friends. Didn't you come up with such a task for the loser?" The guy on the left said quietly, "You spent an hour torturing us about what we would do as losers, and you fell into your own trap. Could you take pity on me?" The blonde looked at his friends pleadingly. "Yeah, Ethan, have you ever shown pity for us?" The friend threw angrily. "You wouldn't let us live if we gave up your sick fantasies. Now you'll have to fulfill your delusions yourself." Ethan, Eric, and Brian had been friends for several years. Initially, they had all been in the same year at the Aviation Institute, but if it hadn't been for Ethan's mischief and debauchery, he would have been in his 4th year of full-time study with his friends. Ethan Parker was the son of the mayor of the city. He was a difficult guy. His father had suffered so much with him that when Ethan graduated from high school, he literally wanted to give him to a military school or enroll him in the army on contract. "Ethan," angrily yelled at his son by his father, "will you ever stop? I can't stand you anymore. I'll either disown you or give you a contract somewhere in Africa. Why did you punch James in the face? Let him watch his mouth." The boy replied, "I didn't ask him to meddle in my business. So because you stole his motorcycle, he had to stand there and smile. My dad could barely contain himself. I'd have ridden around for half an hour and put him back." Crossing his arms on his chest arrogantly, replied the son, "Everyone rides on my bike." Ethan was not a greedy guy, and everyone knew it. He shared the last of his money, and for that he was forgiven his sins. "Ethan, that's enough. Matthew said at last, there will be no home for you, that's it. You're going to Boston to study. What do I need it for?" "I don't want to go there. You know how much I hate Boston. I'm done." His father looked at him sternly. "I asked you nicely not to touch anyone in our town, did I? And you? You're nothing but trouble. You'll go to military school." "No, not that." Ethan begged him. "I'll run away anyway, hiding from them and you somewhere." "Well, then you'll have to pay the compensation yourself," calmly replied the man. "Anyone who enrolled in the military and wants to leave must pay a fine, and that's a lot of money." "No, not the military." The son was angry. "All right, I'll even agree to go to Boston, but just someplace else." "Okay, the last option I will offer you, aviation." Matthew looked at him seriously. "How is that different from military?" Ethan yelled in anger. "Is that a choice? You're offering me the same option with a different sauce. Shoes, I have no other options for you." His father finished and left the room. "You can study there yourself." The boy was angry. "What will I do in this military? There is strict discipline. You can't beat your face. You can't go out when you want to. I'd rather go to the aviation. If I die during a parachute jump, I'll know later." Although Ethan had to jump several times during his studies, but nothing terrible happened. He went to the engineering faculty, and there they didn't do all that practical stuff very often. Mostly they climbed around the barns where the airplanes were and studied them. For the first few days, Ethan walked around as gloomy as a cloud. They put him in a 3-room apartment, and he was alone for the time being. The next room, a 2-room apartment, was already occupied, and there was a nerd from the village, and he couldn't talk to him about anything. He only thought about his studies. The other guy later turned out to be a real asshole, but Ethan didn't know anything about it, but he didn't like him from the beginning. 2 days later, the door to his room opened and a stranger appeared on the doorstep with bags. He was puffing and trying to hold the door open. "Can you help me?" He shouted unhappily to Ethan. "My mom stuffed half the city into this bag, and I don't know how I got it all in." Ethan jumped up from the bed and helped drag the giant bag. The guys tiredly sat down on the bed. "Eric." The stranger held out his hand. "I'm from Austin." Ethan shook his hand. "Neighbor, Houston," and gave him the street and number of his house, laughing. "Did you tell me that in case you get lost in Boston?" Eric laughed. "Okay, now I'll know where to find you." At first, Ethan couldn't decide whether he liked Eric or not, but as time went on, he was lucky to have friends in his life. "Let's peel potatoes. We'll cook dinner," said Ethan the neighbor. "Eric, are you serious?" The guy looked at him in amazement. "Can't we go to the canteen? Have you seen the prices here?" He asked calmly. "If I go to canteens, I'll starve to death in a week. So you give me potatoes, and I'll cook something delicious." "Eric, you're a real cook." Ethan was licking his plate tonight. "I don't even have a mom who cooks this good, that's for sure. Where'd you learn how to do that?" "We have one mom, and she has 5 children," answered the neighbor. "I'm the oldest, so I could do everything. Otherwise, we wouldn't survive." Ethan was the only son in the family and had never thought about siblings, but what Eric had told him was a real revelation. In fact, for Eric, studying was of the utmost importance. His mother had no money, but since she was a widow with many children, her oldest son was given a free place to study in Boston. Eric planned to immediately get a job in the evenings and not only study, but also help his mother with money. Because of this, the boy settled forever in Ethan's heart. 3 more days passed, and there was a knock on their door. The boys were lying on their beds and answered in one voice to come in. The door opened and a skinny guy with acne on his face appeared on the doorstep. "Hi, I guess I'm here to see you." The stranger smiled, and his smile transformed the whole room. "Boy, are you sure you're here to see us?" Ethan joked with him. "The 8th grade is in the building next door. Check with the superintendent." The stranger didn't take it as an insult. He laughed loudly and sat down on the empty bed. "But can you imagine how lucky I'll be in my old age?" He laughed. "You will be decrepit grandfathers with big bellies, and it's like I'm still 20 years old." "Well, immortal, welcome." With a serious face, Eric said, "I hope you're not Koschei." He laughed. "Imagine that, yes." The boy supported him. "Except my death isn't in a needle, and you won't find it." "Judging by the fact that you got into aviation," Eric muttered, "it must be in vodka or heron. You'll probably be on an airplane protecting her from enemies, won't you?" The guys laughed merrily. They were so different, but then again, as they realized later, they were very lucky from it. "Brian, The stranger finally calmed down. "I'm here to see you from Waterloo. To answer your question, I don't walk or ski." Thus began a strong friendship between three very different guys. They had a fun life, but because of Ethan's bully character, they got into all sorts of trouble. The most painful topic was the two dorms. The dormitory of the Boston Aviation Institute was not far from the dormitory of the Chemical Engineering University. The war between them had been going on for years, and no one could count how many noses had been broken in all these endless squabbles. But there were always clashes, one-on-one or mob against mob. "Guys, the chemists are coming at us." Ethan came running into the room one day. "We're up on the roof dealing with them right now." "Ethan." Eric gave him a stern look. "What kind of kindergarten? Calm down. Better let's study compromat for tomorrow." "Eric, what is compromatism?" "There is so interesting." He shouted and ran to the roof. "We're going to have fun." There already stood a crowd of guys who at the top of their lungs shouted an unkind message to those who stood on the roof of the neighboring dormitory. "Hey, you better not piss us off," shouted Ethan. "If we come down now, you'll be in trouble." "Fuck you," he said. "You be careful I don't kick your face in." "Hey, hero, I'm coming down and I'll be waiting for you downstairs," shouted Ethan, and the whole crowd cheered him on. They all ran down the steps and out into the woods that surrounded the aviation dormitory on one side. After about 10 minutes, a large crowd showed up, coming out of the neighboring chemistry dormitory. "There they are, let's go that way," shouted someone, pointing at the forest with his hand. "Beat them, boys." The crowd rushed over there, but they were already waiting for them in the bushes, and a real hand-to-hand fight began. Those idiots. Eric cursed as he and Brian ran out into the street. How could they be stopped? It was impossible to get there. But after about 20 minutes the siren sounded, and the guys started to scatter. Brian spotted Ethan near a large bush, and he and Eric carried him to his room. "Ethan, you're a complete fool and an idiot," scolded the neighbor, treating his shattered forehead. Just as Eric stopped Ethan from bleeding, there was a knock on their apartment. The guys fell silent. "Cover your head and sleep," Eric ordered. "Brian, put that away quickly and sit on the bed." Voices were heard in the hallway. They were asking the neighbors about something. There was a knock on the door. "Hello. There's been a big fight here," the policeman said. "We're looking for witnesses." "Yes, we just got home from work," Brian answered calmly. "Ethan is already asleep. Look at this." The policeman looked into the room. The commandant was staring at the guy who lived in the two-bedroom. He was smiling evilly. "What a bastard," Eric thought to himself. "Now we'll know who the snitch is." The check went away, and the guys breathed freely. Ethan finally came to his senses and started moaning. His left arm was dislocated. "What an asshole," scolded Eric at him. "Why the hell did you go in there?" "Don't yell, it hurts enough," Ethan said through his tears. "Try to pull it out." Eric and Brian gently twisted his arm, and Ethan felt as if something had fallen into place. After half an hour, the pain began to drain away. Only the swelling remained. "Ethan, let's stop with the fighting," Eric said sternly. "You'll get us all thrown out of here, and we've got a real snitch in the next room." I'm sure Bob called the superintendent. Ethan had caused his friends a lot of trouble, but neither Eric nor Brian had ever held a grudge. The kid barely made it from a C to a C, and that was thanks to his friends. Brian wrote him lectures when he missed class. Eric was good at mechanics, so theory and compromat were on him. So, the guys lived cheerfully for almost 3 years, But at the beginning of the 4th year, Ethan got into the wrong place again and was finally expelled. One day, the course was to have a very serious control work. There was a rumor that everyone who didn't do well on it was going to be expelled. Eric and Brian, of course, were worried, but fortunately or not, Ethan accidentally went to the teacher and on his desk saw the answers to all the problems that were in the test. The guy quickly took a picture of everything. He wanted to carefully distribute the answers to all the guys in his group, but Ethan got excited and went to the restroom with Brian to discuss it. "Brian, don't worry, we won't get caught," his friend assured him. "The important thing is that we have the answers, so we'll make it all fit somehow. Imagine if half of us get expelled." And as luck would have it, Bob was in one of the booths at the same time. He waited until Ethan and Brian left and went to the dean, who listened to him but didn't say anything. Maybe that was to the dean's advantage. The quiz went well with no F's in the group, but a few days later the dean approached Ethan. "Ethan Parker, you're expelled." Dryly, he said, "You peeked at the answers to the test, which means that you would have written it by 2. The guy ran to his classmates to find out who turned him in, but the guys denied everything. No one could understand anything. "Ethan, why would we fail you?" said one of them. "You did all this, not only for your own sake, but for ours as well." Suddenly, Ethan saw Bob at the window, smiling and whispering to himself. "You did it, didn't you, you bastard?" The boy grabbed him by the scruff of the neck. "You asshole, why did you do it?" At first, the roommate was very frightened, but then looked intently into the guy's eyes. "Yes, life from you, there is no life." Coldly, he said, "I've had enough of you, so be it." Ethan clenched his fist and swung, but the boys quickly grabbed him and led him out of the classroom. Ethan didn't say anything to his father, of course. He knew he could recover, but it would take a lot of money. The boy didn't want to ask his father for it. Ethan got a job at a construction site to earn money and transfer to a correspondence course. He lived at the guy's place, and they had not moved anyone else in for 6 months, so he had no problems with housing. The only one who created them was Bob's neighbor. He'd written to the superintendent several times that Ethan was living there illegally, but it had all been easily solved with money. The guy was afraid that he would go higher and then he would definitely be evicted from here. "Ethan, he'll get his way sooner or later anyway." Eric sighed. "We have to do something about it. Yes, there's not much time left till the end of school, so maybe it'll pass," answered Ethan. "I talked to the dean of the part-time faculty, and they're willing to take me on as a 4th-year student. I'll even be able to pass the winter session, but I have to pay first." "Ethan, come on, talk to your dad," Brian suggested. "You can tell him that I'll borrow money from you and pay him back little by little. I'm afraid he'll take me away from here, or he'll put me in the army out of spite." Ethan answered with annoyance in his voice. "That's why I need to be reinstated as a correspondence student, or else I'll be in trouble." "Well, how much money do they want?" Eric asked. "Well, not $1 million. "No, of course not," said the friend. "First 30, and then they said we'll see." "Ethan, it's still nothing." Eric rejoiced. "So let's do the math. If we add up what you, me, and Brian have, we'll have $15,000. I'll tell my mom that I can't send her the money until Christmas. The 3 of us need to get good jobs now so we can get it all together in a month." Eric, Brian, Ethan wept. "You guys are real friends. I love you so much. I'll pay you back later." A couple days later, a good job came up. The guys have already tried to do repairs of apartments, but this time they were offered to do a Euro renovation in one 4-room apartment. "If we tense up, we can do it in a month." Eric reasoned. "Ethan, you start in the morning, and Brian and I will come to you right after the lecture." The guys worked hard, and after 2 weeks they had already done quite a lot. The owner liked it and paid them part of the money for the work. Guys, he gave us $1,000 on top. Brian was happy. "At least we'll have a decent meal tonight." It was about 5 p.m., and the guys wanted to work a couple more hours. The money they had gotten today not only warmed their pockets, but also their souls. If I met a charming girl now, I would marry her. Brian said dreamily, smearing plaster on the walls. "It's been a long time since we've had this conversation." Ethan rejoiced Brian. "What's she supposed to be like?" "Fat, skinny, blonde, black-haired?" "Ethan, I honestly don't care." The boy laughed. "Of course, a Triton would hardly fit. I don't think fat girls would look good on me." He looked at his skinny body. "With your anorexia, a fat girl wouldn't fit." Eric backed him up. "If you pick her up, Brian is finished." He laughed. "Well, why don't we look at it from the other side?" Ethan said, holding back a laugh. "We need to change the rules. Let the girl carry Brian in her arms." The boy couldn't calm down. "I can picture it. I'm clutching her neck like a little kid, and she's carrying me to bed. Brian, and not just to bed." Eric said through his laughter, "Let her carry you everywhere, to work, to home, to the kitchen, to the cottage." "Oh, I don't like this kind of family life," Brian sighed. "To be honest, I would like the girl to be smart first of all, so that she and I would have something to talk about. You know how much I love to read, so talking about different topics is as important to me as bed." "I can imagine," laughed Ethan. Brian's wife says, "Come to me, my love. Kiss me," and he's like, "Darling, I need to finish my book first, or we'll never make it with you." "Well, you're exaggerating." Brian said, offended, "I can do this kind of thing without a book. I just wish I could meet a girl like that in my life." "Ethan, what kind of girl do you want?" Eric asked unexpectedly. "I don't think he'd look at anyone but a busty blonde." "Blondes, of course, yes." Ethan said dreamily. "The main thing is that she has to be beautiful." "Eric, are you staying?" His friend looked at him questioningly. "For me, it's all about character," he replied. "I'm in favor of everything to discuss honestly. I do not like in relationships. No games, no lies." "What's wrong? You have to say right away." That day, the guys arrived home late. They quickly prepared dinner and opened a beer. "Shall we play a game?" Ethan suggested. "Let's go on some unusual mission." Playing cards, friends light, and doing all sorts of funny tasks, if you lost, was fun, and everyone was happy to support this game. "I've got it!" the boy exclaimed in delight. "The one who loses will have to meet a girl in a very strange place." "Where else?" Eric said unhappily. "In the toilet? Eric, you fool!" Ethan laughed. "Oh, I got it. In the library." "For you, Ethan, it's a strange place, shrouded in mystery." Brian scratched his head. "We practically live there." "Well, I don't mean a regular library," objected the friend. "Let's see something exotic, shall we?" "Ethan, sometimes I think I know you by heart." Through laughter, Eric replied, "Well, you're going to say something that makes me want to stand or fall. Just explain to me, how can exoticism be related to the theme of the library?" "Well, unless it's a foreign language library. Don't even think about it." Ethan waved his hands. "You know how much I hate Italian. The one who loses has to approach the girl, and in order to keep up appearances, you'd have to speak to her in Italian, and the thought of it makes me dizzy. I think I'm going to faint." "Okay," Eric agreed. "The foreigner is out. How about a science major?" Brr. Ethan shuddered. "I'm sick of aviation, and you're doing it again. All right, if no one minds, we'll stick with the classics. Brian and Eric looked at each other in bewilderment, but he smiled enigmatically. Why are you looking at me like that? He laughed. So the assignment is to meet a girl in the library. And by exotic, you mean that she must be a foreigner and you have to speak Italian with her. Eric's friend was being teased. Oh no, Ethan protested. The girl should only be spoken to in English. When the planted fool on Ethan on a mission. Eric winked mysteriously at Brian. Ethan sat with his hair all tousled. Eric and Brian smiled contentedly. You're teaming up, and that's not fair. The guy wouldn't stop. You set this whole thing up so I'd go to the library for once in my life. And more. Brian laughed. Don't forget, you have to meet a girl there. Where am I going to find a beautiful blonde there? Ethan pouted. They're all ugly and have huge glasses, and I'd die just looking at them. We believe in you, man. Eric laughed. You can swing your fists, right and left, but now from the other side. Prove your manhood. The guys decided to go to the library to celebrate the end of the apartment renovation. Just in time to talk about Ethan rebuilding. Is that any way to celebrate? Ethan muttered unhappily. Well, can we at least go to a club after this torture? No. The friends said in unison. You shouldn't go clubbing. You're deciding your fate. We're going to choose a bride for you and Hugh. In the library? Are you out of your mind? My friend protested. Do you want me to marry her later? Why not? Eric could hardly contain his laughter. If the girl turns out to be good, then we can think about marriage. Now don't you two get on my nerves. Ethan got up from his bed. The deal was just to meet some girl, that's all. We'll see about that. Brian couldn't help himself. If you fall in love, you'll only go to the library to see her. Ethan regretted that he'd thought of such a task for the loser. He thought arrogantly that someone else would lose at cards, but not him. He was not prepared for such a turn of events. 2 more weeks flew by quickly, and the repair was finally finished. The owner of the apartment paid the students in full and thanked them. The guys were happy to be back home. Well, Ethan, on Monday, you can take a correspondence course, said Eric. I wouldn't even advise you to try here. The dean will only go for the big bucks. John told me that a guy from another class wanted to reinstate. He asked for twice as much money as we gave you. I realized it was a dead end, Ethan sighed. As long as I don't get kicked out of my dorm. The superintendent's a rat, Brian said. But I think we can work something out. The main thing is to keep Bob the snitch out of our business. By the way, I suggest that we go to the library this Saturday, that is, tomorrow. Brian, you're always like this. Ethan howled. I was in such a good mood, and you and your library ruined it. I'm in too. Eric supported his friend. You have to keep your word, by the way. All right, the boy said grudgingly. I hope we're not going to go there in the morning. Will you at least let me sleep? Ethan, there's a long line on Saturday, so you'll have to be there at 7 a.m. to get in. Seriously, Brian replied, but then he couldn't take it anymore and laughed. No one is allowed to get up before lunch tomorrow. The next day, the guys got up. The time was already 1 o'clock. It was rainy October weather outside the window. Why don't we give up on the library? Ethan said hopefully. Look outside the window. It's slushy. It must be so cold I don't want to get up. Uh-huh. Brian scolded. How was kicking me out at midnight in the freezing cold to get a beer because I lost at cards a must-do? Brian, do you remember what I got? Eric jumped out of bed. I sang for an hour with my hand out in the crosswalk like an idiot. So what? But we got enough for a beer. My friend laughed. It was so much fun. Ethan, Brian looked at him seriously. "We have a big favor to ask of you. Don't break the rules. Quickly make some eggs and let's go to the library." The boy realized that there was no way to get out of it, so he got up and silently began to set the table. A few minutes later, everyone was eating breakfast. "Guys?" Eric came into the room quickly with clean dishes. "You have no idea what I just saw. Bob's got some girl in his room." "What a bastard!" Ethan cursed. "I might have knocked on his door, but now would have an argument to blackmail him. Let him open his mouth about me now. Maybe his sister's here to see him," Brian suggested. "Or some other relative." "Yeah, wait for it." Eric answered. "Then why did he hide her behind the door so quickly? He probably thought I hadn't seen her. It's just that when I opened the door, Bob shoved someone into his room, and I could tell by the long blonde hair that it wasn't a guy." "Okay, whatever. We should be going by now." Brian urged his friends on. "We're going to be late for the best part." The friends quickly reached the subway and took the train. The trip took them about 40 minutes. Finally, the main entrance to the library appeared in front of them. Unfortunately, the guys had to wait a little longer for Ethan to make a temporary pass. Brian and Eric had been here more than once before. The formalities were over, and the friends went to the reading room. Brian went behind the books so as not to draw much attention to himself. "Do I have to read this?" Ethan took the book his friend had brought him. "Jesus and Aerodynamics. Are you out of your mind?" He hissed. "Why not?" "Such literature is good for you." The guy laughed quietly. "You read and look around at the same time." "I've already looked around." Ethan was angry. "There's no one here but men in glasses or ladies of balsamic age or older." "Look over there." Eric gently pointed to the far table. "I don't know." The friend whispered unhappily. "She has at least one plus. She's young." "So, where's the restroom?" "We go straight ahead and then left and then asked." Brian laughed. "Just your way through it." "How do I look?" Ethan stroked his hair with his hand. "Am I a handsome guy?" "Very." Eric clamped his mouth shut to keep from laughing. "Go look at her and win. We believe in you." "Learn, boys." Ethan stood from the table and slowly made his way to the stranger's table. The guy walked and looked around. He wanted to make sure this was the best choice, but unfortunately for him, all other options were for men over 50. "Oh, sorry," Ethan pronounced, inadvertently hitting the stranger's table. "I've been here since this morning, and my head's not working and my legs are splayed. I understand." The girl smiled. "Granite of science is a damn hard stone." She took off her glasses and laughed softly. "Do you chew on it?" Supported the theme stranger. "Do you have reinforced concrete or just some logarithms?" "I have only atoms and molecules, but they are very difficult to catch." The girl laughed. "Concrete would be better." "Don't tell me you're a chemistry major with a scare," asked Ethan. "Yes," replied the stranger proudly. "Are you there too? You must be a senior, right?" "To my great happiness, no," he replied. "We are not friends with yours at all. We are real enemies." "Ah, you're from the aviation school." The girl smiled. "Honestly, I can't think of anything else." "That's the one." "Ethan." The guy held out his hand. "Well then, shall we get acquainted? I hope you're not afraid to tell me your name because of our blood war." "I'm not afraid." With a grin, the girl replied. "Claire, but I'll tell you right away, I'm not involved in your political squabbles." "Yes, me neither." Sighed the guy. "It's mostly for young people, and as you can see, I'm too old for this sort of thing. I'm a fourth-year student, you know." "All right, Grandpa Ethan." The girl snickered at him. I bow before your respectable age, but please excuse me, because I have to finish my essay today. Oh, full of youth, Claire, and I too must leave you. Kiss the girl's hand with a boy. I hope we will meet under more favorable circumstances next time. The smile never left Ethan's face as he approached his friends. The guy, satisfied, sat down in his chair and only now noticed that Brian wasn't there. Did he run to get his books again? Guy asked with interest. Brian probably thought we'd be here until 9 p.m., but I got my assignment done in an hour. You met her? Eric said in amazement. From the way you cooed at her, did she tell you her name? Or maybe she gave you the keys to her apartment right away. He was making another joke. Her name is Claire. Ethan answered calmly, but we can't do anything with her yet because she belongs to a clan that's hostile to us. Wow, Eric laughed. You two are like the Montags and the Capulets, but I was hoping that our Romeo had met his Juliet. Yeah, she's a dangerous person to be friends with. Ethan objected. She's chemical. First time coming to the library and so unlucky. Do you remember what they did to me then? The boy looked at his hand. I'll never forgive them for that. Where's Brian? I don't know. Eric whispered. He said he went to the bathroom. Maybe he ran into someone he knew on the way. The friends waited for Brian for over an hour, and finally he showed up. Ethan immediately wanted to leave the library after meeting Claire, but they were nowhere without Brian. Are you constipated in there? In anger, he said. We've been waiting for you for almost 2 hours. Well, you've only been waiting for me for an hour, the friend replied calmly. I had business to attend to. I had an important meeting. In the bathroom. Ethan persisted. Jesus, who could you have met there? We were about to call the police to look for you among all those fat guys. Eric laughed and put his head under the table. He couldn't contain himself any longer. After 5 minutes, everyone came to their senses and went with Brian to turn in the books. I'm not letting you go anywhere alone here anymore. Ethan's friend muttered in the back. Or else you'll have some important meeting again, and Eric and I will be under the table here with him. All evening, Ethan bragged to his friends that he had managed to meet a girl in the library. Ethan, I already know by heart what you said to her and what she said back. Eric covered his ears in protest. Would you shut up about Claire? You said yourself that you and her wouldn't work out. That the chemical and its inhabitants are our enemies, or have you changed your mind? No, I can't live with that kind of embarrassment. The boy said arrogantly. Well, I hope that was my first and last time in the library. Was she even pretty? Brian asked his friend. What color were her eyes? What about her hair? How would I know? Ethan replied unhappily. Did I look at her? You're like a country bumpkin, for God's sake. The friend cursed. Were you going to meet her or buy bread from her? How could you not look at her eyes? I mean, the next time you see her, you won't even recognize her? Get away from me. Angrily, Ethan said. I won't see her anywhere else, not her or your library. The next day was Sunday, and the boys couldn't get up for a long time. It was still raining outside, and there was no mood. After lunch, Brian started to get ready to go somewhere. Are you going out? Ethan asked him. Look at the weather out there. Brian, are you stupid? Why don't you tell me what I look like? Without noticing his friend's words, he looked around. Does this sweater go with these pants? Brian, are you going on a date? Eric said in shock. Judging by the way you're dressed, it's true. Who is she? And why don't we know anything about it? If you hadn't been flapping your ears yesterday, but had been looking around, you would have been so lucky. He smiled enigmatically. Today is my first date. I should definitely buy her flowers, mumbled Brian. Wow, That's news. Ethan opened his mouth. We've been tearing our souls out, making enemies, and he found someone in the bathroom. What's the toilet got to do with it? He looked at Ethan resentfully. I just realized you were no good, and we'd have to wait a long time. I went out for a walk, and there she was, standing by the window. I fell in love with her at first sight. Is she from the chemical industry too? Ethan asked curiously. I guess they're the only ones who go to libraries. I hate to break it to you, but no. Olivia is a biology major. The boy answered, She's in her 4th year, like us. Brian, can I switch with you? Ethan begged. Take Claire from chemistry and give me Olivia from biology. Yeah. Wait. His friend looked at him sternly. I went to all this trouble to ask her out on a first date, and you want to ruin it for me? Guys, Olivia is my destiny. And yours, Ethan Claire. Oh, you're so full of shit. The guy jumped out of bed. At least you tell him we suffered for 2 hours in the library yesterday because of him, and he's leaving us. But each of us will meet his girlfriend someday. Sigh. That's when we'll part ways. It's a good thing Brian found Olivia. We'll see what happens to you when you fall in love, Ethan. You're the one we're gonna have so many tantrums with. When I close my eyes, I see her, my blonde. Dreamily said the guy. What a figure she has. Even in my dreams, she drives me crazy. And what will happen to me when I meet her in Java? Eric, you're probably right. That day, Brian returned to the dorm late. His friends had stayed up late to check in with him. Basically, none of them had been in a serious relationship yet. Guys, I'm crazy about her. Closing his eyes, collapsed on the bed Brian. She and I first sat in a cafe. Then we took a long walk along the main streets. Olivia likes to read too. We couldn't stop. We wanted to tell each other everything about each other in one evening. I think she liked me too. At least Olivia agreed to a second date. I don't know if it's for good or bad, but Olivia is from Boston and lives down south with her grandmother. You guys, she's my dream. Well, there goes Brian's luck. Ethan sighed. Now he'll have a residency in Boston housing, and all I got was some Claire. Yeah, maybe she's from Boston too. Eric laughed. You didn't ask her exact address, did you? Of course she didn't tell you. That's where you should start. Laughing, Ethan approached. Not hello, not what's your name, but immediately, where do you live? And then you decide whether you need it or not. A new week began, and Ethan ran around the dean's offices, collecting documents and writing applications. The money that he and the guys had collected was enough to get him into the correspondence program without losing a year, so Ethan Parker became a 4th-year student of the correspondence faculty. They managed to get the dormitory arranged with the commandant, too. She, of course, was a little insolent, named the initially inflated amount, but Ethan made such a pitiful face that the woman gave up and left him the usual rate. The boy worked hard to pay off his friend's debts. At the winter session, they promised to help him with tests and quizzes. Ethan never said anything to his father. 2 weeks passed, and the boy was on his way home from work. He sat in the subway car and slept. Finally, the train pulled in and he got off. Barely rubbing his eyes, the guy headed for the exit. Hello, Ethan. Someone suddenly spoke up. How are your teeth? Are they still intact? The guy looked at the girl carefully. At first, he couldn't understand what she was saying, but then he realized. Claire from the library, is that you? He said in astonishment. What are you doing here? I live here, she laughed. As you remember, our dormitory is right next door. You live in a chemistry dorm? The boy asked in shock. No, not that. For some reason I thought you were from Boston. No, I'm from the village, answered the girl. I'm in my 3rd year, and I'm going to become a great scientist. How's that working out for you? Looked at Claire, Ethan. Judging by the way you're practicing seriously, it's coming along. No, it's not. Claire laughed. I just love chemistry. I'm interested in it. Are you a future pilot? She asked with interest. Or are you studying law here? Neither. The boy smiled. I study engineering by correspondence. Unfortunately, I had to transfer from a full-time program. I thought at first I would come to Boston, study and work, she sighed, but we're so overloaded that we don't have time to sleep, not to mention work part-time. I thought it was worth it to be patient for the first 2 years, then it will be easier. But no, it became even worse. There's so much ass-kicking, it makes me dizzy. Yeah, that's what college life is like. Ethan backed her up. You know what, Claire? Maybe we should go to a coffee shop sometime. You gotta get away from it all once in a while. Well, if it's just for a friendly chat, I don't mind. The girl answered him. Thursday at 6. Is that okay with you? Claire, can't you just call me by my first name? The guy looked at her pleadingly. I'm sick of this formality. Ethan, can we meet at the cafe on Thursday at 6? The girl laughed. It's not far from here. Deal. The boy held out his hand to the girl. Coffee and cakes from me, and in general, whatever you want to eat. The girl nodded and went into the entryway. Ethan only now noticed that he was standing outside the chemistry dormitory. I'm a traitor. He whispered to himself that he had willingly come into the enemy's camp and surrendered to him. Aviation will never forgive me for this. The guy was in no mood to go up to his room. The guys were already home. Brian was reading some textbook. Eric was making some sketches. Why are you in a mood? Brian asked his friend when he came in. Did something happen to you? Are you sick? I'm a traitor. Ethan said with annoyance in his voice. You have no idea where I was just now. I went to see the chemists. Were you dealing with them again? Eric looked at him in horror. Ethan, did you fight again? Worse, he sat down on his bed. It's all your fault with your library. Come on, let's go. What's wrong? His friends couldn't understand. Did you get caught for the last time you fought? I took a girl there today. Finally, he confessed. Remember Claire from the library? She happens to live in their dorm. I ran into her by chance today. I didn't even realize I'd walked her to the chemistry dorm. I was a fool to invite her to the cafeteria on Thursday. Oh my God, I'm so stupid. Brian threw down his textbook. You should be glad she's coming to your place on a date. Maybe this girl will finally talk some sense into you, and you'll stop being scared of chemistry. I'm not afraid of her, he replied dryly. I just hate her. They're all arrogant and insolent. What's the girl got to do with it? Eric asked him. Did she run on the rooftops with you and swing her fists? Honestly, Ethan, you're like a child sometimes. You're 21 years old now, so it's time to grow up. It's a matter of honor and dignity for me. The guy said, if I started being friends with them, I wouldn't respect myself. Okay, then we'll keep Claire. Eric laughed. Will it save her from your revenge? It's true what Brian said. You should be glad the girl agreed to go to the cafe with you, or you'll be 70 by the time you wait for your blonde. Ethan first decided that he wouldn't go to the cafe, but when Thursday came, he was drawn there by some inner force. The guy just threw on his jacket and went to meet Claire, and it was one of the best evenings of his life. Claire turned out to be a very humorous girl that laughed and joked all evening. Ethan thought he was even busting a gut. The girl's charm was unparalleled. Claire, you're a fun person to be with, Ethan said, barely stopping his laughter. I don't know how your molecules and atoms don't go crazy for you. Oh, Ethan, sometimes they do. The girl laughed. You know, everybody's experiment is going fine, but mine, something explodes or some foam comes out of the test tube. In general, I'm a bit of a chemist, but it's people like you that make geniuses. The guy looked at her and thought, so she has green eyes and long brown hair, and when she takes off her glasses, she becomes very beautiful. What's it like? Ethan was asked curiously by his friends when he returned from his date. Claire is a nice girl, he said. Even though she's not blonde, I like her. She's easy to be with, and she's like she understands me right off the bat. And what about the beautiful blonde? Through laughter said Eric, have you already forgotten about her? No. Ethan looked at him. Even though Claire has green eyes and brown hair, she's beautiful too. It doesn't even bother you that she's chemical. Brian looked at him intently. Not anymore, calmly replied the guy. He lay down on his bed and turned his back to the wall. Something's not right. Eric wanted to make a joke. Ethan must have fallen in love with Claire. After the first date, Ethan wasn't really looking forward to seeing the girl again, but inside he was drawn to her. Claire told him that on Saturdays, she was usually studying at the library. So the guy couldn't stand it, and he was going to meet her this weekend. Where are you going so pretty? Ethan asked Brian as he started to get ready. Isn't it your day off? It's a day off. He answered seriously. I'm going to the library. I have to meet Claire. God, who would have thought our jokes would be true? Eric said in shock. Ethan, are you really going to the library for her? Yes, the boy said shortly. You told me yourself that she was going to be my fiancée, so what's the big deal? Or did you, as usual, change your mind? No, I haven't. Brian got up from the bed. We're all for it. I'm leaving for Olivia's in an hour or two, by the way. So, Eric, you're the only one left. But if it happens to me, believe me, you'll be the first people I tell about it. The guy replied and laughed. Sometimes I think it's not me, but she'll find me. Yeah, she'll knock on our door and say, Eric, I'm here to see you. Brian laughed. You've got a referral from the Celestial office, so sign it. Ethan made himself a temporary pass and went to the reading room. He looked around and saw Claire at the far table. The girl was writing something. Hello, he whispered. I see that you have a total lawlessness in the chemistry department. It is necessary to abuse your students like that. Aha! Survival of the fittest. Claire laughed. Ethan, hi. Are you working? Or are you here for moral support? The latter. The guy smiled. God, how have you been sitting here for so many hours? When I look around, I get this image of all these cabinets piling up on top of us and us climbing out from under the books. I thought so at first, too, the girl said, holding back a laugh. I even went over to them to check if they were stable. Were you wobbling them from side to side? Ethan couldn't take it. I imagine you in a construction helmet, overalls, and big boots. Okay, Ethan, stop it. Begrudgingly, the student looked at him. I've got 20 pages to write today. Well, you have an assistant now. The guy sat down next to her. Tell me what to do. Ethan, thank you. Claire smiled. I'll show you. And you dictate quietly. Let's start with this paragraph. Mother of God. The boy said in shock. How am I supposed to read these formulas? There's a hieroglyph here, with sticks coming off it in different directions, and some other stuff on their ends. I don't even know those letters. You don't have to read the formulas, just read their names as they stand in the text. Claire calmed him down. I know them by heart. At first, Ethan found it difficult to pronounce all these names, and it was impossible to speak loudly, but after half an hour their work boiled over. and to Claire's surprise, they finished very quickly. "Ethan, that's it." The girl closed the book happily. "Wow, you and I broke all records today." "Grandpa Ethan, you're still good," she laughed. "God, let's get out of here, or I'm going to burst out laughing." The boys quickly handed in their books and went to the locker room. Claire's mouth was agape with joy. She was so happy that she had written half of her project that she couldn't calm down. "Ethan, we should celebrate." She looked sternly at the boy. "May I thank you and take you out for coffee?" "Claire, I don't mind." My stomach was rumbling so much that I thought the security guard was going to come up to us and charge him with something. The student laughed. "Yeah, he'd give you a stern look and say, 'Could you take the troublemaker outside?' You'd unbuckle your belly in public and wave to him. Claire, where does all this stuff come from in your head?" The guy laughed. "You have such a vivid imagination. You should write books. But if only books for people who don't want to sleep at night, then yes," she said. "I'll make up stories that will give them insomnia. She's so unusual." Ethan thought to himself. On the one hand, like a child on the other hand, she has a great inner strength. The boys arrived home and quickly ran into their cafe. A few minutes later, a hot pizza and 2 large glasses of coffee were smoking on their table. "Ethan, I'm so grateful to you." The girl looked at the guy. "If it weren't for you, I'd be at the library all day tomorrow." The boy looked into her green eyes, and it seemed to him that they had become a big, clear lake, into which he dived, and it was very pleasant to swim in it. "Ethan," Claire's voice came to him. "Would you like some ice cream? The strawberry and chocolate ones here are delicious. I'll pay for it." "Go ahead," he smiled. "But the ice cream will be on me, and don't even protest." Claire was so easy to talk to Ethan that it seemed like they had been friends for years, but that night, the guy had a new feeling for her. "Ethan, what are you doing?" His friends were worried when, without saying a word, he flopped down on the bed and pushed himself against the wall. "Did you and Claire have a fight?" The guy sat down on the bed, looked at the guys, and was silent for a long time, then smiled broadly. "Guys, I think I'm in love." Finally, he said, "I've never felt like this before. Everything inside just sings. My whole body feels so light, I don't even want to say anything so as not to spook this state." It turns out that Ethan is a romantic. Eric whistled. Who would have thought that behind his powerful fists there was our friend's vulnerable soul? "I'm honestly afraid of one thing." Ethan sighed. "Claire and I are like good friends, and I'm afraid that if I tell her I love her, she'll reject me, and I don't want to lose her." "Give her some time," answered Brian. "Women will never tell you the truth right away. They have to trust us first." Ethan and Claire often met not only on weekends, but also during the week. The guy was well aware that he was seriously in love with the girl. For him, this was not a romantic adventure or an affair for a couple months. Ethan, thanks to Claire, had learned a lot about himself. He thought that he could change girls like a glove, but it turned out to be the opposite. Ethan turned out to be a one lover. Except for Claire, he didn't want to see anyone else. The guy was no longer interested in blondes or girls with beautiful forms. In an instant, Claire, the simplest girl, became his dream. The time was approaching Christmas, and Ethan wanted to invite the girl to a cafe to give her a present. Claire had a very busy time. She had to pass all her credits and get admission to exams, but she always found some way to meet Ethan. "Claire, Merry Christmas to you." He held out a small box to the girl. "This is for you. I'm sorry, but I don't have much experience in choosing gifts for girls, so I settled for the classics." The girl opened the gift with curiosity. on the beautiful fabric. Gold earrings in the form of hearts glittered. Claire blushed, not sure what to say to her. "Ethan, they are very beautiful." "Thank you so much," she said seriously and looked him in the eye. "I love you." Unexpectedly, Ethan said, "I'm not rushing you into a decision. I know you need time to think about it, and I'll wait for you." The girl didn't answer him anything. You could tell by the red blotches on her cheeks that she was very worried. After this meeting, Claire disappeared somewhere. She didn't pick up the phone at first, but then she said that she was very busy and asked them to meet after the session. Ethan wasn't himself. Why did I even tell her I loved her? He berated himself. Maybe she only thought of me as a friend, and I'd ruined everything. "Ethan, let's be logical." Eric suggested. "If she didn't like you, she wouldn't date you, so she has feelings for you." It could be that Claire's just scared. If she's as much in love with someone for the first time as you are, then naturally there is a lot of fear. She may be so afraid of losing you herself that she doesn't know what to do. Ethan's suffering for his friends was simply unbearable. What the guys did nothing but do. He wouldn't eat, he wouldn't talk to anyone. The guy disappeared all day at work, then did not get out of bed. It was the middle of January when his phone rang. "Claire, hi." The guy said cheerfully, "How are you? I'm worried about you. You asked me not to call you yet." "Ethan, can you come to our cafe tonight?" The girl answered calmly. "I'll be waiting for you there. I'm going out with Claire tonight." The boy jumped up from the bed. "God, I almost lost my mind. I thought I'd never see her again." Ethan was very nervous. He kept thinking about how he should behave with Claire. Dozens of scenarios of their conversation popped into his head, but he realized that none of it was right. Finally, at 7 o'clock, Claire walked into the cafe, the girl holding herself somewhat coldly. "Ethan." She looked the guy in the eye. "You're a good guy, you're my best friend, but is there someone else?" Ethan couldn't stand it. "Claire, are you seeing someone already?" "No," she answered quickly. "That's not the point." The girl looked intently into his eyes. "Then what is it?" The boy persisted. "Your parents won't let you. Or are you engaged to someone else?" He searched for the right answer. "Ethan, I care about you a lot." Claire lowered her eyes. "But we'd better break up now, because the longer we're together, the more I love you. But if you meet someone else in your life, I won't survive it." "I don't know how to explain it to you." "Why would I meet someone else, Claire?" Ethan wondered. "I love you. I don't need anyone else. Can you understand that?" "Claire, I can't go on without you. Why should we both suffer now?" "I need you, do you hear me? And I need you." The girl cried. "But I'm so afraid of losing you that I don't want to live." "Why should you lose me?" Ethan was indignant. "Silly girl. Claire, I don't care about anyone. I live because I have you. I don't need anyone else." From that day on, Claire and Ethan began what they call a serious relationship. "Claire," Ethan once said to a girl, "this year let us pass quietly, and the next year, you'll be in the 4th year, we'll get married on May holidays, then you and I will have a year left." "Ethan, I love you so much." The girl kissed the guy. "Then after the wedding we can rent an apartment. You know, one of my professors suggested that I write my thesis for him. So he said that from the 5th year, I can work part-time in his laboratory, we can eat on this money, and on your salary to pay for the apartment. Ethan, I know you'd like me to stay home with the kids, but you know my personality. I can't do it without my chemistry." "I know." The guy laughed. "That's why I'm not gonna say anything against it. When you get tired of your chemistry, then you'll sit at home." The next year, in August, another wedding was planned. Brian and Olivia, after graduation, wanted to get married and have a celebration for their loved ones. Before Christmas, Brian officially introduced his girlfriend to his friends. They celebrated the occasion in a cafe. Ethan, on March 8, gathered all his friends and introduced Claire to them and Olivia. "Eric, you're the only one left." Ethan once told him, "Well, why don't we play a game and come up with some quest for you to meet your dream?" "But I can find her without your cards." He laughed. "It's May, and I have a very good feeling about it." The end of the school year created a big fuss at the Institute. Brian had gone somewhere else, so Eric stood quietly looking out the window. "Excuse me, who's Eric?" There was a melodious voice. The guy turned and saw a short, dark-haired girl, and it was as if an electric current ran through his body. The girl called his first and last name again, and Eric finally approached her. "Hello. My name is Nora Clark." She formally introduced herself. "You and I are being sent to Germany together for an internship." "An internship?" the boy asked in shock. "To Germany?" He couldn't believe what she was saying. "I'm shocked myself." The girl smiled. "My supervisor just told me. He asked me to find you. We need to come to him immediately. He will explain everything to us." The girl quickly walked towards the helicopter engineering department. Eric had so many questions in his head that he could hardly contain himself not to pounce on Nora. 15 minutes later, they were there. "Hello, Eric," extended his hand to the guy, a nice, stocky man. "My name is Christian. I'm the vice dean of this faculty and a professor at the same time." He laughed. "What do I call you?" "Eric?" "Hello, Christian." The student shook hands with the professor. Well, Eric, I'll keep you in mind for now, and seriously we'll talk after the lectures." The professor spoke quickly. "So you and Nora are going on an internship to Germany this July. It will be more of a familiarization trip, but I'm sure the Germans will still surprise you with something. You will go as a future aircraft engineer and will represent airplanes. There was a competition, and your dean insisted that you be chosen. And from the helicopters, Nora will go. She is a genius in the field of helicopter construction." Eric looked at the girl with his mouth open. They had 2 girls on the engineering first year, but they then transferred, but that the designer of helicopter designer was a girl, and even so fragile, the guy could not believe it. "Guys, she looks like a 9th grader. She even has a childish face." Eric told his friends with delight. "And this little girl builds helicopters. I'm totally shocked. Her supervisor said that she even has 1 patent." "So what?" objected Ethan. "I heard somewhere that one of the developers was a woman, so why not?" "Ethan, do you have any idea how much it takes to design something?" I was arguing with my friend Brian. A man's head would boil. "I'm really excited about your friend." "Well, she's not my friend yet," he said with annoyance in his voice. "But I wouldn't say no to something like that. Nora killed me at first sight." "There you go," Ethan rejoiced. "At last there will be happiness on Eric's street. You there in Germany, just do not be stupid. Take her to a cafe, somewhere in the park for a walk." "Yeah, wait." Brian laughed. "They will talk about their airplanes and helicopters all day long, and in general, we have a friend who has reached such a high position, and we are still sitting without beer. Ethan, you've got nothing to do anyway. Go to the store. We should celebrate Eric's success. How about something more serious?" The guide looked at his friends. "Champagne or wine?" "No, we have a strict teacher tomorrow." The guys all said the same thing. "He'll blow our minds." The friends were madly happy for Eric. Of course, they realized that the boy deserved it. Eric had worked so hard to finish aviation well that it couldn't go unnoticed. The kid's mother and his siblings were crazy about the news. His neighbors even threw a party outside in Eric's honor. The session flew by quickly, and Eric and Nora went to Stuttgart, Germany, for an internship. The guys quickly found common topics for conversation. They didn't even need to look for them, despite the difference in specialization. They toured hangars and went on excursions together. Nora kept striking Eric. On the one hand, there was a kind of simplicity about her. The girl was from a deep village. None of her parents even had an education, but since childhood, little Nora all the time mastered something. When she was 16, she was already in the village repairing farm machinery. It seemed that there was no limit to her ingenuity and intelligence, but in her dreams, there was only the sky. At first, Nora wanted to design passenger planes, but with time the girl realized that it is not so easy to come up with something new in this field nowadays, and she switched to helicopters and light planes. The chairman of the village made a lot of effort to knock out for the genius, a place in Boston at the Aviation Institute. The girl's lively mind immediately caught the eye. She seemed to be able to solve any problem, and from this side, she took everything seriously. Eric did not know how to approach her at first, and only in the last week he invited Nora to a cafe. "You know, Eric, I really like it here." Closing her eyes, Nora said, "It's so peaceful everywhere. You could easily design something in this environment. Everyone is silent, as if helping you to concentrate on your work. Nora, are your children going to be designers too?" The boy smiled. "Maybe you'll pass your passion on to them in your genes. I'll tell you the truth, I don't know if I'll ever get married." The girl looked at him seriously. "My unusualness, not every young man will suit. Normal guys won't even look at me. So maybe I, like many inventors, will be alone all my life." Nora sighed. "Nora, you're an amazing girl." Eric said fondly, "You really are extraordinary, but that makes you even more valuable." The girl blushed. No one had ever looked at her as a woman. Of course she, like everyone else, dreamed of true love, but guys were never interested in her as a girl. Nora had gotten used to the idea that no one wanted her. "Thank you, Eric," she said shyly. "I'm sorry, I don't get compliments like that very often. You know, you have so many qualities that I just can't list them all." He replied, "But you're also honest, and that's the most important quality for me." Nora and Eric returned home and brought not only a lot of impressions, but also the fire of love that was burning in their hearts. "Nora, I'll have to go home at the airport," Eric told the girl, "but as soon as I get back in the 20s of August, you and I will definitely meet." "Okay," she smiled. "I'll be back in Boston on the 25th, and I'll be waiting for us to meet." They reached the subway and boarded the train together. Unfortunately, Nora's dormitory was in a different location, so Eric didn't walk her home. "Eric, the friends were happy to see us." "Hi, guys. I'm so happy to see you. Let's set the table and celebrate my arrival. I brought you real German beer and their famous sausages. Well, shall we have a drink?" Ethan raised his bottle. "I'm going to kiss you." All evening the friends discussed Eric's trip. It seemed that he had already told about everything, but there were more and more questions. "How is it going with Nora?" Brian asked curiously. "Did it work out?" "I think we're halfway there." He smiled. "But I know one thing, I won't give her to anyone else. Nora is mine." "Well, then you two are serious." Ethan patted him on the shoulder. "Eric, I'm so happy for you, for God's sake. I don't even want to be apart from you for a month." A few days later, everyone went home, each with their own plans. Brian was flying to his parents' house with Olivia to meet them. Ethan's father insisted that his son come home for a couple weeks. Not only was Eric's family waiting for him at home, but the neighbors were already preparing for his arrival. A day later, Ethan and Eric accompanied Brian and Olivia to the airport. It was obvious that the girl was very nervous. "Olivia, hang in there." Ethan hugged her goodbye. "Brain, don't let her get hurt." The guys said goodbye, and Eric and Ethan went home. The latter had to meet Claire in a couple of hours. "Ethan, when is Claire leaving?" Eric asked his friend, "Don't you want to go with her?" "I'd love to." The boy answered with annoyance in his voice. "She and I planned it that way, but my father is bugging me. He wants me to come home right away. Claire is leaving by train tomorrow, and we're going to buy presents for her relatives today. You know, I envy you guys." The guy sighed. "You have everything well. All the crises have passed, and we with Nora, all this is yet to come. It's okay, buddy." Ethan patted him on the shoulder. "Your Nora's not going anywhere. Soon you'll be traveling to yours like this. I wish it were sooner." Eric sighed dreamily. "It's only been a day, and I miss her already." "Well, come in," the man said cheerfully, opening the gate. "How many years, how many winters?" "Hello, Matthew," answered the guest. "Yes, it's been a long time. Finally, we'll have a nice sit-down tonight." Matthew's guest was his old friend Daniel. He was once his classmate, then went to Boston, and after graduation he moved to Houston. When Ethan was still a teenager, they traveled to see them once, but then things got busy and no one had time to get together. "Doris, is that you?" The landlord said in shock, looking at the beautiful blonde. "God, if I had seen you anywhere, I would never have recognized you." "That's how time flies, Matthew." "Doris is already 22. Daniel laughed. The guests and their hosts were cozy on the terrace. Daniel and his family had come for a few days. In fact, it was not a casual meeting. Daniel was a mid-level businessman, so he always had everything calculated. Back in Boston, Daniel started his own business, and from that time on he only prospered. Not to say that the man was the richest man in the city, but he was in the top 5. Matthew, of course, lived more modestly, but in Houston he was not only the first man, but also the richest. "Well, Matthew Margaret," the guest said calmly, "maybe we should talk about our children's future. I think the time has come. As far as I understand, Ethan will take your place after you. He's a good kid, too." "Thank God Ethan's outgrown it," the mayor answered. "Yes, Doris would be the most suitable match for him. We have no objections. He's coming tomorrow, by the way, so let him and Doris get reacquainted. Neither he nor she are children, so we'll have to start all over again." "Well, that's good." Daniel rubbed his hands together happily. "We'll both benefit from this union." Doris was a willful girl. Her temper was not easy, but what her father wanted most of all was for his daughter to get out of his sight. For a simple commoner, he did not agree to give her, and then he got the idea to remember his old friends. In fact, Doris had already made a name for herself in Boston. She changed guys so easily that the father was from his daughter just in horror. At first he wanted to send her abroad, but he was afraid that she'd make such a mess there that he wouldn't be able to pay her back for the rest of his life, and dumping her on the shoulders of a hot-tempered Ethan would be a good thing. Maybe the guy would cheat on her. In 2 years, Doris has had 3 weddings, then she had a fight with her fiancé, then she was dumped. In general, a good word for the girl in Boston did not remember the girl, and this did not just hurt her father, but directly affected his reputation. After Doris left her first wedding, cursing with the last words of the groom, Daniel was denied 2 lucrative contracts. The man had already been in the manufacturing, disposable tableware business for many years. His factory was doing well year after year, but Doris seemed to be deliberately trying to ruin it. But now we're finally rid of her. Daniel whispered to his wife at night, "We've had enough of our nerves, and it'll be good for Matthew to be related to us. I'll pay good money for Doris." "Oh, I don't know, Daniel." My wife sighed. "We must pray to God she doesn't make a scandal at the wedding." "Yes, we would only have to hold the wedding, and the rest let her husband already decide with her." The man reasoned. "Hello, Ethan." Doris came out to meet the boy as he entered the courtyard. The mayor's son woke up. In front of him stood a beautiful blonde with a lush bust. The boy looked at her carefully. He tried to figure out who it was, but he couldn't. Doris, on the contrary, behaved naively modest. Her father told her that if the girl would behave well, he would give her her car. After the next wedding 3 months ago, her father took away her car and the keys to the apartment, which he bought for her. So the girl tried with all her might to get her car back, as she called it, and finally move out from her parents. Their surveillance has already got to her, and she dreamed of only one thing, as soon as possible to return home. Doris. She held out her hand to the boy. "Have you forgotten me?" "No." He answered in astonishment. "You've just changed a lot. For the better, I hope." She laughed coquettishly. "Well, welcome home. We've been visiting for a few days now." Ethan didn't quite like having guests at their house, and especially not having Doris here. Maybe Ethan would have been attracted to the girl a few years ago, but now he had grown up a lot, and he looked at life in a completely different way. The only woman in his life was Claire, and he didn't want to change her for anyone else. "Why did you call me?" He asked his father that evening. "I don't think Daniel was crazy to see me. Ethan, you know." Dad was being evasive. It was an accident. Matthew came first, and then his daughter. "Dad, stop bullshitting me." The boy gave him a stern look. "What do they want here?" "Ethan, you are a grown-up guy, and you should realize that we wish you a better future." Matthew finally answered, "Are you trying to marry me off to them?" The son said in shock, "I have told you many times that I will only marry Claire." "Why do we need your Claire?" The father was angry. "What good is she to me? I'm marrying a decent girl. Judging by the way she looks, there's no dignity there for a long time." Ethan replied coldly, "Don't get on my nerves. I've given you my word. You don't even have anything to blackmail me with. I haven't even taken money from you for the last year." "Ethan," his father looked at him angrily, "don't you dare go against me. There will be no Claire in our house. We weren't going to live with you." The boy replied calmly, "We're staying in Boston, so you don't have to worry about that." "All right, I beg you, stay a few days," quietly asked the man. "When they leave, you can go back to your Boston, to your Claire." Ethan was reluctant to spend another week in the company of guests, but he agreed to his father's request. To Doris's surprise, she liked Ethan. He was a handsome fellow. She tried to hit on him, but he was adamant. The days passed quickly, and the guests left. "But we still have plenty of time until next spring," Ethan's mother said. "I saw them exchanging phone numbers, so maybe they've got it all ahead of them. Your words to God." My husband sighed. "It would be foolish to lose such a good match for us." A few days later, Ethan left for Boston. The night before, he wanted to talk to his parents. "I'm grateful for everything you've done for me." The boy began, "But I'll decide my own fate. If you don't want me and Claire to get married next year at our house, we won't take offense." "Ethan, I'm the mayor of this town," his father answered him. "It's a matter of reputation for me. I won't have my son having a wedding on the wrong side of town. Your wedding will be at our house." Ethan returned to Boston. After a while, his friends arrived as well. A new school year had begun. Brian and Eric were preparing for the last session and writing their diplomas. Ethan continued working and studying part-time. The guys grew up and started to make plans for their future life. Brian, after his marriage to Olivia, came to her apartment. The girl's grandmother was already old, and she needed constant supervision. So they decided not to abandon the old lady. The guy was offered a place in graduate school, but Brian has already looked for a good job, not related to aviation. "Guys, I need to feed my family," the guy told his friends. "And on the dry, I was offered one little thing. The main thing, I will get higher education, and there you can work anywhere. Where I still immediately after graduation, the position of chief engineer at the plant will get, so this is a great opportunity for me." Eric and Nora started a serious relationship. The guy was in a very difficult position. At first, he wanted to return home to help his mother. He had already been offered a teaching position at their institute, but Nora wanted to go to graduate school to realize all her ideas. The boy's mother didn't want to destroy his family. "Son, we will manage here ourselves without you," she said. "If you can, you'll help us. And Kathy will soon come to Boston to study with you." Kathy was the second child in the family, and she, like her older brother, was going to be sent to Boston, but to a different academy. Eric and Nora were planning a wedding the following September. After his studies, the boy wanted to stay on to teach in his department. The institute promised to give him a one-room apartment for the duration of his work. Ethan and Claire didn't want to leave Boston either. The girl really had a talent for chemistry. After graduation, not only did they keep her at the department, but next August Claire was to go to Holland for 6 months because she had an interesting project with an institute there. Ethan was to get a visa to Holland after her marriage. Everything was going well, and they lived together as before, but one day Ethan's phone rang. "Ethan," someone sobbed into the receiver. "I'm asking you to help me, please. I really need your help. Who is it?" The boy said in astonishment, "What happened? What can I do for you?" "It's Doris." He heard him. "Ethan, please come to Houston right away. I'll explain everything to you on the spot." "Doris, what's wrong?" Ethan was worried. "Did the bandits catch you?" "No," she answered. "You see, there's a man following me around. I told him I was getting married soon. He said he'd only leave me alone if he saw my fiancé." "Doris, what's the problem with that? You ask any guy in Houston." The boy laughed. "Or tell your father about him. That's the thing, he knows everybody here." The girl sobbed. "He threatened me and my father." "Ethan, I'm begging you to help me. I'll pay your way. We'll just sit in a cafe and go to my house. Then you'll leave right away." "Doris, I'm sorry, but I can't." Ethan said coldly, "I have so many important things to do. I can't do this. It's not serious." "Ethan, I don't know who he is. I've never seen him." Doris pleaded. "He keeps calling me from different numbers and threatening me that if I lie to him, he'll build up my parents' debts. I wanted to go to the police, but he started threatening me. He just demands that I show up somewhere with my fiancé. This man wants me to prove that I'm not lying to him, that I turned him down with good reason. Ethan, I'm begging you." "All right, I'll come over tomorrow." The guy barely agreed. "Only for half a day, I can't do it anymore." The next day, Doris met the boy in a cafe. She smiled sweetly and seemed so happy. "Ethan, pretend you're courting me." Doris asked. "Take my hand, play like you're kissing me." After the cafe, Doris and Ethan got into the car and she drove him to her house. He ostentatiously entered the entryway, took the elevator up to her apartment. There Ethan sat for about an hour and drove to the train station to get home. After that incident, the guy never heard from Doris again. "Well, Jacob, we'll see who's who." Doris laughed hysterically, taking the card with photos from the man she had hired. "I'm going to marry you anyway." Here was the thing. Doris, after she and her parents had moved back home from Houston, had finally gotten her own car and apartment. And she had, just a few days later, begun a passionate affair with the son of a wealthy man. Jacob, just like her, and had fame all over the city. Both were handsome, but were constantly changing partners. Doris had long wanted to get him, and now her dream had come true. The girl plunged headlong into a new relationship and lost control over herself. A month later, she found out that she was pregnant. Doris wanted to use this argument to marry Jacob. "Doris, you are certainly an amazing girl, but I am not ready for fatherhood." The young man answered her. "Jacob, but I love you so much." She hugged her lover. "We are so good together. Why ruin it all? We'll have a son. We'll be a real family." "Doris, give me some time to think." The man kissed the girl. "I need to get used to having a child." Jacob was an experienced catcher. He had broken so many hearts in his life that he could fool anyone. He decided to wait for a while because Doris might have lied about the pregnancy, and in general, he expected a 3 or 4 month affair. Doris, on the other hand, knew for sure that she was pregnant, and she needed to be proactive. She wanted to show Jacob the pictures of Ethan so that he would be jealous of her and propose right away. Not that Doris really wanted to give birth to a child, but the girl realized that if she had an abortion now, she would definitely lose Jacob. In general, for almost 4 months, the man evaded a direct answer. After Doris showed him photos with Ethan and announced that he offered her hand and heart, it seemed to her that it helped, and Jacob began to talk about the wedding. But after a couple weeks, it all went away, and the man, like a ghost, began to disappear from her life. "I'm sorry, but we can't give you an abortion." The doctor disagreed. "You're already in your 6th month." Doris walked out of the clinic in shock. For the first time in her life, she didn't know what to do. She had tightened her stomach as much as she could so that her parents wouldn't notice. But Doris was sure that in case of emergency, she could always get an abortion. The girl never even considered that it might be too late. Doris spent weeks just going crazy. She didn't know what she could think of. One evening, she sat on her bed and drank herbal tea to calm down a little. Suddenly, some pictures that were lying on the table caught her eye. "God, I'm a fool." The girl rejoiced. "How could I not have thought of that at once?" For several days, Doris thought about her conversation. Then she dialed someone's number. "Margaret, hello," she said in a gentle voice. "It's Doris. How are you?" "Oh, Doris. Hi. It's so good to hear from you." Ethan's mother answered the phone. "Margaret," she sobbed. "I didn't want to tell you anything, but Ethan left me. I've been seeing him for months. He came to Houston to see me, and I went to Boston to see him. I love him so much, I'm going crazy. Aunt Margaret, he got me pregnant." "Oh my God," the woman said in shock. "Why didn't you tell us before?" "He's getting married in a month. We've already made all the arrangements. I need to talk to Matthew right away." "Doris, don't worry, darling. I'll call you soon." The girl sat and nervously moved her hands. She was so afraid that she would fail, but after about 20 minutes her phone rang. "Doris?" It was Matthew's voice. "Daughter, listen to me. We're not canceling the wedding, and I'm not telling Ethan anything. If we lay all the cards on him now, he won't come home, and he'll go to Boston to marry Claire. We need that girl to find out, then she'll dump Ethan for sure. Claire won't forgive him for cheating. He's told us that many times. All right, Doris agreed. Then I'll go to his wedding and tell him about it in front of everyone. Could you please talk to my father too? I'm so afraid of him. He's bound to blame me for everything that's happened. Everything was ready for the wedding. On Claire's side, there weren't many guests, just her parents, her older brother, and one friend from Ethan's side. The guests were invited by her father, and Ethan was joined by Brian and Olivia and Eric and Nora. All the guests were waiting for the newlyweds to drive up for the check-in. But suddenly, Ethan's mother took the microphone and asked all the guests to gather. "Friends, I apologize to all of you in a shaky voice," she said, "but we just had no other way to tell you about it. Unfortunately, this wedding cannot take place. Our son Ethan has a girlfriend who loves him very much and who is expecting a child with him." Doris barely made it to the stage with a huge belly. The girl was wiping her tears. "I'm sorry, but I had no other way for Ethan to stop." The girl sobbed. "Ethan, I love you so much. Eric, I think we have only one way out. Brian once said, we have to trick this girl into telling the truth, which we'll record on the phone. Right now, we need to know if she had a baby or not. Then we need a DNA test, and if it's not Ethan's kid, which I have no doubt it is, we're gonna nail this broad to the wall." A few days later, the guys found out that Doris had given birth a few days ago. "Eric, let's get to Houston," Brian ordered. "Now the hard part. We need to get Ethan's saliva analyzed, but only so he doesn't suspect anything. Ethan?" Eric came up to the guy tonight. "We all got tested for some kind of dangerous virus today. The commandant said it's mandatory. I'll get a nurse for you in the morning." The guys made arrangements with one lab and asked that no one tell Ethan anything. They had half a day to get everything organized. The next day, early in the morning, Ethan's saliva was taken before work. The guy drove to work, and his friends and the lab tech rushed to Houston. "You realize this is a very delicate matter," Matcherly explained to the head doctor of the maternity ward, Brian. "Paul, he was a real hero, invented a new kind of fighter, and the motherland is very proud of him. He was posthumously given a prize of a very large sum, but it has come to our attention that Doris had a child by him. You must realize that we can't give that money to her child without proof. We need to do a DNA test. Well, if that's what the state decides, fine." The doctor finally agreed. "Let your nurse put on a robe and take a test from the child, or then I will be accused of all this if suddenly he is not his child and the money was transferred to his account." The guys were very worried, but after 5 days it was confirmed what they thought: there was no relation. "All right, Eric. Now it's your turn." Brian laughed. "We need to nail this woman so that she won't be able to say a word." A few days later, the friends went to Houston again. Ethan was so depressed that he didn't even realize his friends were doing something behind his back. "Doris?" asked a young man in a hat and glasses when the girl opened the door. "Could we have a serious talk with you?" "What do you want from me?" She answered sharply. "I don't know you. I'm Ethan's attorney. We have a DNA paternity test, and you have a criminal record. In your case, you're looking at up to 2 years in prison. Do you know who my father is?" Doris screamed in rage. "Get out of here. I'll call the police. So you'd better get dressed and put the child somewhere, because you will be taken away by the police." Eric answered calmly. "You still don't want to talk to me? My client will stop at nothing to put you in jail for slander. Either you tell me the whole truth, or we will push for you in court for 2 years in prison. What do you want me to do?" Doris was frightened. "Come in. I'll tell you everything." About half an hour passed. In Eric's pocket, their whole conversation was recorded by a cell phone. "Okay, I'll talk to my client. so that he withdraws his lawsuit, leaving Doris's apartment that the guy, "I beg you, please understand my situation. I have a small child." Doris cried. "I think you don't need to worry anymore." The guest calmed her down. "I'll call him now, and we'll stop this business, so neither you nor your baby will get hurt. Goodbye. I will hope for your promise." The girl shouted at him one last time. "Why did you make this mess?" Eric cursed to himself. What's your child got to do with it? A real fool, how can you put a child in such danger? The next day, Eric and Brian waited for Claire near the institute. She was due to leave in a few days. "Claire, I'm asking you to listen to us." A guy approached the girl. "Ethan is not guilty of anything. Here is the proof." The guy handed the girl the results of the DNA test. Then Eric turned on the tape. "Oh my God!" I burst into tears and threw myself on the guy's neck. "Brian, I love him so much I can't be without him." I don't know how I ever survived that. It was almost 8 when Ethan got home from work. Eric and Brian were going somewhere. "Ethan will be there soon." Eric said, "We're going to run to the store next door." Just as they left, the door to the room opened. Ethan was lying on the bed with his eyes closed. "Ethan, I'm sorry." The boy heard a familiar voice and jumped up sharply on the bed. "Claire?" He couldn't believe his eyes. "Claire, I love you so much." He kissed the girl. "God, I almost went crazy. I can't live without you, my love." "Ethan, I can't live without you either." She sobbed. "I don't need anyone but you."